Well, as the Modi government looks to complete 1 year in power next week, we have the Railway Minister, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, joining us on the program today. Mr. Prabhu, lovely to have you on Left, Right and Centre and on NDTV. My first question really is your overall assessment of how the government has done after 1 year. On a scale of 1 to 10, if you were to honestly rate the government's performance, what would it be?
Globally, all the rating agencies are under cloud. So the question that came up is that we should rate the rating agencies. So let me not join the game of rating because everybody will, obviously my decision could be biased, but look at it very objectively. The government started its inning on a very difficult note. Everything was going wrong for the country. The image of India, the fundamentals of the economy. There was a current account deficit which was growing, had reached something close to 3%, very alarming. We had a fiscal deficit was running very high for a simple reason because we had undertaken programs of high populism without any content. We had a big challenge in terms of finding out money for investment into infrastructure which was suffering. Projects were stuck, 8.9 lakh crores. The banks were in trouble because most of the money was given from the bank loans because 75% of the debt, maybe 25% equity. That means the tax savers' money which had gone into the banks as savings had been exposed to very risky assets. So in that context, if you look at it, where we have travelled, I think we have done a great job in 1 year.
One of the sort of perceptions that is going around is that, and Mr. Raghuram Rajan made this comment as well today, that maybe in a sense the government, Mr. Raghuram Rajan made a comment today that there were very high expectations. From the government. Do you think in that sense the expectations were too high because of the mandate Mr. Modi got, that suddenly everything would be transformed in a matter of months? Would you concede that they were too high?
That's right. Expectations were undoubtedly high because of the type of leadership Mr. Modi provided in Gujarat, and therefore what the type of leadership people are looking forward to him from India. So nothing wrong in having high expectations, but expectations must have a time frame for fulfillment. You definitely expect something high, but then you must realize that there is going to be some time that is required for those expectations to be fulfilled. So you can rate the government on two counts: expectation versus performance, as well as what we were and what we have achieved so far. I think on both the counts we have done a great job.
Two things that you think are the big achievements of this government, and two things where you think you need to improve.
One, I would put it as, there are many, but let me just, because you are saying only two, I will take one. One is I will take financial inclusion. I would feel it's one of the greatest achievement of this government. From 15th of August, when Prime Minister announced, and 26th of January before the Republic Day, we now have a bank account, at least one per family. Sure, they're not all the accounts which are operated today, but now we are coming to the banking fold. The operation will happen when we start actually creating money which is otherwise going as some sort of a scheme from the government, cash transfers will go through that bank account. But can you imagine the implication of this on a long-term basis? First of all, every person has an identity through a bank account. We can reach him through an online transaction very quickly. Now we have the Aadhaar card which is getting linked to that. The huge spin-off benefit which is absolutely unimaginable. Just imagine the implications of that in terms of avoiding black money. See, many of the transactions that take place through the parallel economy that we call it, because it was not passing to the banking system. The banking system itself will be a great insurance against an abuse of a system by which the taxes are not paid and everything else. So this is one great achievement in my opinion.
And the second?
Second achievement in my opinion is the social security that the Prime Minister talked about. This is an unbelievable thing that every citizen of India, and there are already somewhat 8 crores people are enrolled from the 9th of May when we launched it till today, maybe more now because we can actually monitor it on an hourly basis. These people had to fend for themselves. A large population of India, which we call it unorganized sector, say about 2 or 3% of the people who are working as employees in government or in private sector, they have some security, pension, provident fund, everything else. Large number of people who work on fields as land laborers, who work in domestic helps, those who work in small factories, those who are taxi drivers, like self-employed people.
So social security.
Who have no security at all. Now they'll be able to get a pension if they contribute small amount, and that's another very important thing, that you contribute. you realize that, and something which is very affordable, something like, I was just giving an example that day, that how much you have to contribute? Less than cost of a tea for a day. So you skip a tea for a day and you get a pension for the rest of your life when you are not working.
So what do you think has gone wrong? I mean, it's not all a happy picture. So and in your honest assessment, where do you think the government could have done better?
I don't think we have done bad at all. So this is the expectation issue now. Let us come to that issue. So one
Everything
is
is hunky-dory.
Now, basically, I personally feel so, honestly speaking.
You personally
of course,
do?
So we had to face some challenges. Like for example, one challenge was something which was completely beyond our control. It's an issue caused by unseasonal rains. But this is caused by climate change. It's a global issue. Many countries are suffering from it, but India is the most vulnerable, which we have been saying all the time. Mr. Modi was the only chief minister in India who created a climate change department in his ministry.
But you don't think that, of course, the unseasonal rains which hit the farmers happened also at a time when the government was firefighting on the land bill. And it all just came together and then built up this whole perception as far as the opposition is concerned and activists are concerned that the government is anti-farmer. Do you believe that at least on the land bill things could have been handled differently?
See, the opposition had to raise some issue because they found that everything was going so well. So they had to pick up some issue. So they picked up this land issue. See, there are two things I've been saying to people, that there are two things people are saying. That one is the land, which they see all the time, not realizing that land is a source of development of any nation. What is the resource on which you build up your economy? Very frankly, these are natural resources, the natural capital, which has to be leveraged so that the economy grows. Gulf countries grew, the natural capital was oil, they grew on that. US has a lot of natural resources, they grew on that. US has land, of course. Is it good for farmer or bad for farmers? If you create a railway project, the farmer can travel. Farmer can send his produce by railway so that he can get a better price for it. If you want to create a cold chain, you need land. The cold chain will add value to the farmer's income. If you create on the land storage and warehousing facility, which will create an insurance against the farmer when the prices get depressed if the crop is good, or when the crop is depressed he doesn't have to sell in the market, prices are depressed, he doesn't have to sell in the market because he can store it. Warehousing doesn't need land. Also, I will put into perspective, there are 44% of the farmer earlier, the National Sample Survey, if I could be wrong in terms of percent, but something in that area, had said that they don't want to do farming. That's a National Sample Survey report which was published during the
that was a CSDS report.
They said we don't want to do farming. Why? Because they felt that we need to find out an avenue outside the farming for some betterment of their lives. Maybe the services sector, maybe the manufacturing sector. If you want to develop either services or manufacturing, that's what farmer wants, his son to go for a job. How do you create that?
You're telling me this, but how do you respond to the perception or the opposition's accusation that the government is pro-corporate, pro-industry, the suit boot ki sarkar jibe that Rahul Gandhi made?
First of all, I don't know what is meant by suit boot sarkar. Of course, I will be very happy if our opposition doesn't want us to wear any shoes and we want to just walk like that. I don't mind doing that. If that is what, because everybody, including the opposition, I'm sure they wear something or other. But if you want to wear, no problem at all. And now if they want to decide the dress code for the country, this is something we are already talking about, that we are trying to do moral policing. Is it something that we want to tell people that where we should clothes? But in any case, I don't see anybody around me who is wearing a suit in this particular weather. It is not a good idea to wear that anyway.
No, but it's on the perception issue.
So that's what I'm saying. If you try to create a wrong perception, it will not stick because it's not a reality. We are the people who are grounded into the reality. The Prime Minister of India, where he came from. He came from a most humble background and he's the first Prime Minister to occupy the highest office coming from such a humble background. So we should be proud of it or we should not be proud of it? So now look at it like this. What is the DNA of this government? The DNA of this government is, really speaking, farmers, poor, deprived classes. That's what are the bulk of our MPs. They have been elected by the people for that reason. Where we got our MPs from?
Not India Inc., not corporate India.
Now what this particular criticism, so we try to do something for them. I don't know where we got it from. If at all, if my other colleagues have explained that in fact the previous government could have been accused of that. So if you want to just take away your accusation and put it on somebody else, that's not something going to stick.
Mr. Babu, you were a minister, a senior minister in Mr. Vajpayee's government as well. How What is it like to work under Mr. Modi as Prime Minister? How different is he from Mr. Vajpayee as Prime Minister?
See, there are two different individuals, so they are obviously different. But there is something common. The commonness is they are both extremely concerned about development of India. Both realize the importance of infrastructure for future development. In fact, if you really look at it, 98 to 2004, when the Vajpayee was leading that government, that's one government did phenomenally well for developing infrastructure, including roads, including railways, ports and many others. And this Prime Minister is trying to put all of that into reality. This is the first Prime Minister I would feel, as far as I am concerned, who think about railways so much. There has never been a Prime Minister who has thought about railways. Of course, Mr. Vajpayee, as you know, he was like a
towering figure,
statesman, because he has been, in politics for so many years. Mr. Modi, I'm sure he respects him a lot, and therefore he always says that Mr. Vajpayee is one of his idols.
But how is he? I asked you about what it's like to sort of work with Mr. Modi, because there is again a perception or reports that he's a very domineering figure, and things are very highly centralized in this government. The Prime Minister's office really takes, in fact, almost all decisions. Is that true? Is he a very domineering figure? I saw him laughing.
I wish that was the situation so that I don't have to take any decision. But it is not a reality. In fact, this is the Prime Minister who actually is available for consultation to everybody. Now, obviously, he's a tall leader. So, obviously, people get overawed by his personality. But I will tell you frankly, I not have a single instance in which the Prime Minister or the PMO has interfered in a way it is perceived to be in the media. It's not true. He cannot accomplish all.
This was actually one of the criticisms of Arun Shourie, as you know, who he spoke out recently, and he said it's everything is centralized. It's a very centralized system where, dominated by the Prime Minister's office.
No,
give us your perspective.
My personal experience, as I told you, is this. You try to understand the cabinet system of the government. The cabinet system of the government presupposes that Prime Minister has to lead as a leader of the pack. So, he picks up his team, but Prime Minister leads it. So, he's a leader which is doing a job which is constitutionally assigned to him. He is only doing what Constitution expects him to do. If you don't do that job, you're not doing your constitutional responsibility. So, he's only fulfilling his constitutional responsibility, and at operational level, I will tell you very frankly, there is no interference of the kind that one can think of.
Does every decision you make go through the Prime Minister's office?
Not, I don't think, of course, what requires under the rules of business only goes there, otherwise nothing. So what is required rules of business? That's the system in the government of India. We have to get it done. Infrastructure of India.
Does anyone ever disagree with him in a cabinet meeting?
Oh, that's of course very confidential. I cannot tell you how the
cabinet meeting... you don't have to tell me about what, but does anyone ever say, Mr. Modi, I don't agree?
I will tell you something which is, really speaking, is Prime Minister is such a great leader, available to us for his leadership as an asset, is available to every ministry so that we can take it forward. So that's a great advantage for our
But nobody
government.
ever disagrees or says that they disagree with anything? No, but there's never any disagreement?
Actually say that, the democratic process, as I told you, all cabinet decisions are confidential decisions. This is something, and that's what the oath that each one of us take, that we swear by. So that's the only oath that we take to become a minister.
No. How do you look at Arun Shourie's criticism though? The criticism that the government is more concerned about headlines than it is about policies. And the reason why Arun Shourie's criticism is important is because he is somebody who has been a senior minister when you were in the NDA government earlier, and someone who's been seen as so close to the power center. How do you look at his criticism?
These headlines are given by the media.
But he said it.
But that's of course is probably something that you can answer as to how do you get it. But our programs, the government of India, obviously there has to be some banner line for that program. If the Prime Minister is saying Samajik Surakshitata, is it a headline or is it a program? Samajik Surakshitata is obviously the title for that program, but you look at the underlying program. There is a detailed program for each of these. Now you call it Jan Dhan Yojana. This was definitely a slogan, but was it only a slogan? But if you are not given that slogan, how would have motivated all the bank employees throughout the country to come out and do such a stupendous job, which is even appreciated globally?
So slogans are important, you're saying that. Slogans are also important.
How do you communicate? So, therefore each of these programs called Jan Dhan Yojana was a slogan which became a reality. We talked about Samajik Surakshita, and from 9th May till today we have achieved so much. So all of this is programs with a title, but a programs with content. The content is conveyed to the people. We have implemented part of this. Many of these programs are already implemented. So how do you do? For example, you call it like, for example, our Lal Bahadur Shastri said, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. What do you mean by that? That particular time, we are just won a war with Pakistan, but we had a problem of food security. How do you communicate with the people? So you have to tell the farmers, Jawan is important, but Kisan is as important. And therefore he gave that slogan. So then when what we are really doing is through that program, he actually expected everybody to fast for a day. And people did fast, if you recall, at that particular time in 1965. Of course, you
I
are
wouldn't
very young.
recall.
I know that, but I'm much older than you, so I can tell you I did fast.
Yeah.
So just can you imagine? How did it happen? If you have not said that Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan and this is something you have to do for the people. So I think we are much more than what seems to be on the surface. We have done a very deep, grounded, detailed program which are already under implementation. Many of them are fully implemented, and therefore this government has done a greater job than what is perceived to be.
Let me finally ask you though the most important thing, which is actually your ministry. It's interesting, you said the other day that you were not for the privatization of the railways and you didn't feel that that was necessarily the solution to turning the railways around. What you're saying actually contradicts what a committee that the government appointed headed by Mr. Bibek Debroy has actually recommended. If you're not for privatization, why don't you allow the Indian Railways to compete with private players then, in the way that Air India then competed with, other private airlines?
See, let me first put this issue into perspective. In fact, Bibek Debroy himself has given a detailed interview, and he has said that his committee never recommended privatization. I went through all the previous committees of the government had appointed, because there are so many which were appointed by the previous government. So all the ministers appointed committees. So those committees have also not recommended privatization of the railways, because nobody, what is meant by privatization is
that the government gives up control.
Yeah, one company which now I am transferring my 51% shares to you or more, and therefore you own the company, not me as the government, and that is privatization. Do you think anything like this is even contemplated by anybody? For a simple reason, it is not ever possible. Because railway itself, the valuation, because you cannot transfer it again because the CAG will come back, you have to transfer it at a market price. The market price of railway assets could run into trillions. So that is something which has not been ever contemplated. So what I meant by that was that that particular process, as what we normally understand and comprehend as privatization, is never suggested by anybody. Therefore, we are not trying to put in.
But you still believe the government should play a role in running the railways?
But what we have never said, and which I strongly believe in, is that we want to bring in the competition. We want to bring in, and therefore we are creating a regulator. I have told the parliament, we are trying to create a regulatory framework for the railways so that any private participation that wants to come into railways will have a proper trade-off. Try to understand that privatization.
So private players, are you in favor of private players coming to compete with the Indian Railways?
Yeah, but today, eventually. Look at it like this. Which are the areas? So we have to identify the areas. So this is the process. See, we have to understand one thing. We have to sequence everything properly. If you do something, jump the queue, then things will go wrong. Today, our railways are clogged. So we are running trains at such an inordinate delay, which really is really a shameful thing. But why it is happening? Because on tracks, particularly say between Mughal Sarai and Allahabad, there is nothing, no place to move. And if one gets clogged in one section, then the whole line right up to Calcutta gets delayed. In such a situation, is there any room for anybody else to come in? So today we are not able to operate at all. So what is that we are doing? We are trying to create a capacity expansion wherein
for things to operate even.
So at least the more trains can fly. Another thing I'll tell you, what we have, this is a priority, is a dedicated freight corridor. We are trying to complete it sooner than what was planned earlier. I hope I'll succeed. Then we'll be able to take the goods traffic away from the existing tracks. Today, do you know that a goods train has no timetable? They just run, they go from one time to another Ram Bharose. So we are trying to make sure that they will be able to run. Once I move away that goods traffic from the passenger tracks, passenger trains can increase.
How do you though respond to the criticism by people like former Railway Minister Dinesh Trivedi, who said the other day that, bullet trains shouldn't be the priority. You need to get our current trains, our suburban trains, our current network to work better, that our priorities are misplaced.
Of course, I only wish that he had the same view when he was a minister. Because this bullet train idea has been pursued for a very long time, and even for a time when we are not in the government. But our view of bullet train is very simple. We are not trying to develop bullet train at the expense of the common passenger facilities. We want to use public money as much as possible only for the common people who travel by it. And therefore, if you look at my budget, which should be an indicator about what we think about the whole thing. 98%, I would say 98% of our resources are developed for this particular purpose. Improving customer facilities, whether it's catering, whether it is laundry, whether it's linen, whether it is safety, whether it is
And that
coach.
bullet trains are a small part of it.
And then we are not even provided 1 rupee for bullet train in the budget.
Yeah, not in this
so
one.
bullet train will be a project in itself, which has been pursued for long. Now we are trying to take it to the logical end by completing the feasibility studies, which will be ready very soon. Japanese are doing that feasibility studies. And as you know, there are only 2 countries which had a basic technology for bullet train, that was France and Japan. Now China has also acquired it over a period of time. So the other bullet train project which I think about is between Delhi and Chennai, in which we'll try to look at it. I'm sure this visit you would have got some insight that they are very keen on developing that. That will be their money, they will try to commit. So we'll but evaluate it properly. We are trying to create a special authority.
So you're saying you haven't sort of lost sight of what the real goal is?
No, absolutely not. You know, our priorities are clear, but this is not at the expense of other.
Yeah.
If I love my mother, doesn't mean I'm not loving my wife. So we can love both at the same time, right? So this is a priority, but not a priority at the expense of the other.
Well, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us on NDTV today. Thank you.
Thank you.